Okay, this is my toolmaker's vise, and it's been horribly abused, not through treatment because it's still in very good condition, but through rust. It was never properly treated for rust. It was stored in damp locations, and so it's got a thick crust all over it. I could probably Scotch-Brite that off, but you know, it would be stained, and I want to bring it up to a kind of a pretty look. So this was made in June 18th, 1969 is when I stamped that. And I'll show you a little bit of disassembly here, and you'll see how this works. As you can see, this pulls, when you tighten the screw, this is how you tighten on your workpiece. As you pull the screw, it's not only pulling it inward, but it's also pulling it downward, and that helps to keep this movable jaw from lifting. And in a second, I'll show you some of the uses, typical uses for a toolmaker's vise. They're not a mill vise. I see a lot of this style vise on a mill. They don't have great holding power like you would need for a milling job, but you know, in a surface grinder they work just fine. So here's basically the different parts, and of course we have a screw up the center of the movable jaw, and there is like a swivel socket here. This is a washer that I've cut kind of an oval on that fits into a ball socket on this movable jaw, so that as it changes position, it's always resting on a positive portion of the jaw. This, once upon a time, had like a cap that came up around the screw, but it's broken off evidently. I got this a little bit too hard. It didn't have the toughness to stand the pressure. So you have your screw, and you have your movable jaw. That's here, and you see it's got an angle cut in the base of this thing to allow the screw to change angles as it tightens up. And then inside here is a little roller. If I can get this out, this is a kind of a close fit here. Okay, it's just a little roller with two bosses machined into the end of it. This is all heat treated, by the way. This is case hardened. And inside here, you drill holes from the outside, and then when you mill the slot on the inside, it ends up with a kind of a scalloped effect, and that's what the bosses on this pin fit into. And these are really nice. It's real easy to change the position. You loosen the screw up, you can slide it in, pull it back until it locks in. And here's a few parts that I made as a mold maker. And in a job shop, because you're not really connected with a manufacturer, it's real rare to really get sample parts back from the tools you built, so you never really get to see the final result of what your tool is producing. So here's the first mold I ever made. I made this under the direction of an old mold maker. I had built dies for a good number of years and was getting a little bit, I don't know if you'd call it burned out, but maybe bored, and I needed something a little bit different. So anyway, I made this mold. It's grossly over polished. It's way better than it needs to be, but the old boy, he just had me just polish the bejeepers out of this mold. It was just a single cavity compression mold. This was one of the molds that I actually used a decal to pantograph to produce the carbon electrodes to do some EDM work in here. Here's another mold. This was a 2-cavity mold. Pretty simple. I don't know what it was. It feels kind of like nylon, maybe. Nylon flashes. You start getting a little bit more than 2/10 of a thousandths of clearance between your details, and you start getting flash So they're very tightly and precision fit. Here's a couple of molds. This was one mold that was a 6-cavity, I believe it was a transfer mold, but a 6-cavity cam mold. It cammed 2 pins in from the sides here. This one was pretty simple. This is the mating part that I built for. This was also a 6-cavity mold and cam mold. It had a keeper inside where the 2 pins meet. That's why it was cammed in from the side, and some contours on the pins. And then you can see a lot of little details in here, and that's why this vise of mine exists, because you can see how holding these little details would be a little bit difficult. If you've ever built molds, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. And here's another little mold, or a little part out of mold, 2-cavity mold, and it was probably one of the more complicated ones I made, and I'm going to get my light and show you a little bit closer view of some of the detail work in this. There you can see some of the detail. These there's 4, I guess you'd call them holes in this thing, but they're not really holes. They're bosses that are machined in because they have relief on the sides, and a lot of contours down in there. This was all dimensioned very, very tightly. You can see all the way around this thing how much busy work there was on it. I have no idea what it does. Some engraving in there. I sent it out for engraving. This side is pretty simple, but this was a busy side here. A lot of little details to make up, and that vise really paid off for that. Also, I have a cube, and I used my cube a lot on these little details. And I did tell you a half-truth a minute ago. I said this vise was never on a mill, which was true, but along with being on a surface grinder, I did use it on a decal several times. As you know, a decal is a German pantograph. Okay, so that's that. Let's get on with the surface grinding.